I want to discuss just some random theory here, things that I think about, give you an idea of what goes on in my head. This is, like I said, theory. This is just like a hypothesis that I have. I could be wrong, I could be right, but in any case, it's been very helpful to me to understand everything I'm about to lay out here. It's given me a lot of peace in knowing who I am versus who other hairstylists and barbers are, and who other artists are through social media. So I want to kind of document this sort of feedback loop that occurs, or a couple different kinds of feedback loops that occur, and what happens because of social media. Hopefully to pinpoint what causes a lot of our insecurities, a lot of our strife, a lot of our disagreements and stuff, so we can ultimately be unified and be, stand together in accepting our differences. And I just think if everybody understood this, the industry would be a better place. So this chart is about social media for artists, and when I say artists, I'm going to try to keep the verbiage on this paper here like art generic. However, what I talk about, because the art that I do is hair, I'm going to discuss hair, but I'm going to write down kind of generic art terms here because I don't know much about other artistic industries, but I'd be willing to bet that this could fit and be applicable for some of them. Obviously, we create art. And then because this is a little lecture about social media, the two things we do with social media is we share our art on the screen, and then we take inspiration from other art that we see on the screen. That's essentially, if you were to really boil it down, those are the things we do with social media. So when I say create art in the sense of hair, this could be anything from a precision haircut to some kind of balayage. You could be not even a professional hairstylist. This could be styling your own hair for the screen to share on screen. And even if you don't do hair professionally, I think also, I know a lot of barbers and stylists who would say, well, I don't really create art. I'm just a barber. I like doing a 4 back and sides and finger length on top, But I would argue this. Think about if you go to a fast food restaurant, or if you get a beverage of sorts and you look at what's on the side of the can, you never think, oh, well, that's art. But at some point, somebody had to pick up a pen or a brush and create the logo that you see every day when you go to a restaurant. And so you wouldn't consider it art, but at its core, it was at one point art. So even if you're doing a number 4 all over, there is some art to that. So when I say create art, share it on a screen, take inspiration from a screen, this could be anything to do with hair. These next 2 branches off of taking the inspiration from a screen that I'm going to draw here are kind of deliberately the far extremes. The reason being, it's a lot easier to demonstrate principles when we're talking in extremes. When you look at the fringes, I think principles are more easily identifiable. I would say most barbers and stylists aren't either of these far 2 extremes, but I'm going to draw the far 2 extremes. The 2 things we could do once we take inspiration from the screen is we can improve, and again, this is just talking in absolutes, we can improve only upon the art and the actual technical work of our haircut. The one far extreme is you look at the art on a screen that from somebody else, and you take inspiration from it, and it causes you to go look at your own art and improve it, and take inspiration from what you've just seen on the screen, and then be a little bit better at what you have been sharing on a screen previously. And once you improve your art, you're going to go back to, again, create art. So you create your art, you share it on a screen, you take inspiration from other people sharing art on a screen, and then you use that inspiration to improve upon your art. And I say only upon your art because what I describe over here are other ways you can improve. And so when I say improve only upon your art, this means doing a better haircut. This means cutting a straighter line. This is like the technical aspect of your hair. You're inspired, you improve upon it. And so what happens when we get this loop right here is feedback. And so if I were to take a microphone up to an amplifier and stick the microphone up to the speaker, then it cycles back. What the microphone is picking up is what the speaker is putting out, and it creates this feedback loop that, the high-pitched ringing sound that is obnoxious. And so I think when we have a loop on influence, such as we do here, we get feedback. And so this feedback doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It doesn't always have to be a good thing. I would say, in fact, there are two sides to it. So we'll call this feedback loop A. So feedback loop A is based upon improving your art, based upon improving what you actually do with the hair, and whether it's updos or color or styling or a haircut. The feedback, the tone that will generate from this loop, from you sharing on a screen, copying someone on a screen who probably copied what you shared on the screen, and making this loop here. The worst case scenario of what can come out of this feedback loop, I would say, is creating unrealistic, and when I say unrealistic, like unrealistic, unnatural, unreachable levels of technicality in your work. It's what tends to happen is it'll take something that started as what it started as, and once there's so many copies of it, you end up not having what you started with. Like, example would be like, the classic side parted haircut. So many people copied that and recopied that and tried to improve upon it technically that eventually they go, you know what? I'm going to put this square hairline right here and make it a little cleaner than what I had seen on a screen before. And then the next guy wants to make the fade a little bit smoother than what he had seen on a screen before. And eventually what started off as a classic haircut is nowhere near classic anymore, because now it's been almost synthesized, like the level of technicality that goes into it, and improving upon what existed before, you end up getting like these hairlines that don't exist in nature, and it's like everything becomes kind of hyper real and hyper perfect and over the top, like possibly even fake. And so the negative side of worst case scenario coming out of that is you get people using fibers and things, and not that I'm saying that's bad. But it is bad to a lot of people. A lot of people think it's false and wrong to use hair fibers to color in a fade. But what leads to the desire to have such a perfect haircut that you would take fake hair and put it on the skin to fake a perfect haircut, or use makeup essentially to create a perfect haircut, the desire to do that comes from this feedback loop, being a little bit better than what you saw, being a little bit better than what you saw, and then someone sees it and they want to be a little bit better than that, and then and that feedback loop creates these expectations of this like super perfect, over the top, false perfect perfection in a haircut. So I would call that unrealistic standards. The other thing that I think it leads to, and I'm guilty of this at times, is if people are copying the technical work from, or not, and when I say copying, I don't mean like, ripping someone off, but I mean if you're being inspired by somebody on a screen, and it inspires you to put something on a screen, and you kind of lean over toward you like weird hair, this feedback loop is what then spits out weird for the sake of weird, to where it's so weird that it's like not even digestible, and it's like, why would somebody want to do that? And it's because there's so many copies that the feedback created from it is this over the top exaggeration of weird. Excuse me. What could have started off as like a very slightly different idea got improved upon and improved upon and improved upon until eventually it's not improved anymore. It's just weird. So I don't know if weird for the sake of weird is all bad. I don't know if any of this is all bad. I'm just I was just like racking my brain trying to think, if people are copying people who are copying people who are copying people, what is the ultimate negative outcome of that? And as I said a minute ago, there's a positive side and a negative side. So this positive side, I would say, will lead very simply to better art. So if you're being inspired by somebody on the screen, and then you're putting your art out there that you was inspired by somebody on a screen, and this feedback loop is happening, the best case scenario is better art happens because of this. Worst case scenario is art becomes twisted and unrealistic because it's like just trying to one up over one up over one up. But best case scenario is we get better art, and I do think this happens. I think I've been blown away over recent years finding people who are like, oh, I've been cutting hair for 6 months, and their work is so good and so tasteful. And I think it's a case of them when they first started creating their art, they had already been taking inspiration from a screen and using that inspiration to improve upon their art and continue to do better and better haircuts. And so I feel like, and maybe this could have always existed and maybe social media just brought it to our attention, but I feel like because of social media, a part of this feedback loop, improving your art and sharing your improved art and improving upon that art, has created really, really good, talented young artists. One of the benefits of this better art is that it'll inspire future artists who will then create art. So we create like this bigger feedback loop that brings in new artists and causes the scene and the industry to grow in a positive way. I would say that the pursuit of better art and the sort of glorification of it, the appreciation of the better art, is something that is mostly not done by the masses. It's I would say it takes kind of connoisseurs and aficionados, and so I'll actually write that here. Hang on. I think the pursuit of this finest art of hair or finest art of anything is going to go over the heads of the masses, but it's going to intrigue like the aficionados and the people who really are into the craft and into the details, and they like they're okay with like just on the verge of the weirdest that weird can get, and like I would say even outside of weird haircuts, it's like think about your clients. Like how many of your clients can actually recognize a perfect fade from a really good fade? I would say that most of them can't. It just takes. There's like a small select few, like these kind of innovators, the top, what is it, 12% of the population, according to the law of diffusion of innovation. It's like those front runners, those innovators and early adopters. Those are the ones who care about the better art in and of itself. And as I go to describe the top half of this chart here, you'll see what I mean, as opposed to when I say they're into the better art, it's like, well, yeah, of course, aren't we all? It's like, no, when I describe the other half, you'll see what most of us are into. So I would say that the better art does intrigue the aficionados, and that in this area, you actually have really cool brands and things that just pop up. This is where like the passion exists. This is where like kind of grassroots brands pop up and do amazing things, and this is where I like to think I hang out. Going back to putting our art on the screen and then taking inspiration from other art on the screen, the other far extreme, the opposite of only improving your art, far extreme, is only improving the presentation of your art. So when I say improve upon the presentation of your art, what I mean is this is everything from your characteristics and personality as an artist. Like if you want to be somebody on a screen, it's not, hey, here's just a haircut. It's, oh, here's a haircut by me, cool guy, Andrew. So that's adding to the presentation, is having your own sort of persona and identity yourself that factors into the value of that art. It's another thing is it could just be taking a better photo. So the presentation of your art is, I think it's, I mean, it's anything you do to make the art more easily digestible and more easy to understand and more easy to, more pleasing to the eye. Like essentially, maybe aiming for viral content. You know, it's making your content prettier. And so what I said earlier, and I hope I described okay, is these two situations here are polar opposites, and but they could happen also at the same time. I would say most of the time they do happen at the same time. You try to do better hair and you try to express it more cleverly. So the two are not mutually exclusive. They can exist together, but for the sake of drawing out these ideas, it's a lot easier to separate them and push them to opposite ends of the spectrum. Isolating that concept and saying, oh, well, you're not improving your art, you're just improving the way that you display it, and the way that people find it and like it. That it's not a bad thing. I think it has to be done. And in fact, I would say it's as valuable as improving your art. I heard a saying from Ivan Zoot a long time ago, you know, how good do you have to be at cutting hair? And the answer is good enough. And I like that, and I stuck with that forever, because I'm not the greatest hair cutter. Like, I've improved upon my art enough to make a living. And after that, I do like to take better photos. I do like to do things to improve the presentation of my art. And so after improving the presentation of my art, I go back and create more art. And once I create that art, I share it on the screen. I see other people sharing art on the screen. And then, you know, I would say in the past like 2 years, it's been really competitive, like the photography on Instagram. I used to look at Robert Braid, Kevin Lutchman, and Maddie Conrad, and I was like, those are the only barbers who could take a photo like I could take a photo. And now, like, I look around Instagram and I'm like, oh, everyone could take a photo like I take a photo. It's becoming so competitive, and this feedback loop is happening where I would see Maddie and Robert Braid and all these different guys doing great presentational work for their art of creating haircuts, and it would inspire me to improve my art. And I'd run out and buy a flash, and then I'd learn how to you know, tweak photos in a certain way in editing to try to make it a little more bold and make it pop a little more, and it creates another feedback loop. So feedback loop A, again, is purely based on improving your art based on what you've taken off a screen and then putting it back on a screen and creating a feedback loop. Feedback loop B is improving the way that you portray your art based on what you see on a screen. Because let's be honest, Instagram is not about how good your art is, it's about how good you can make it look on a screen. And so feedback loop B exists in trying to improve the way you look on a screen and the way your art looks on a screen, and trying to improve the presentation of your art. So much like feedback loop A, there's good and there's bad to it. And I would say, much like feedback loop A, the good is very, very idealized, and it's very like, oh, we hope that happens, and sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So worst case scenario for feedback loop B, is content that represents false realities. If you are trying to get a better photo and a better photo and a better photo, and eventually the only way you can do a better photo to represent the art you created is maybe blurring a fade a little bit in Photoshop, you know, maybe desaturating a blonde a little bit. So eventually the competition and the feedback loop, trying to improve upon what you've seen and then putting it out there, and then someone trying to improve upon that and putting it out there. The negative side effect that can come out of this feedback loop is content that represents false realities. And this is, I think, such a hot button topic for people, but that's exactly why it exists. Much like certain haircut styles exist because of trying to overly perfect a good haircut to the point that it's beyond natural. And then maybe fibers get involved, and maybe putting fake hairlines and fake parts become involved. Same thing happens with content on a screen. Is you try to improve your content so much that eventually it goes beyond what is kind of exists in reality. And let me point out too that it's not just about like photoshopping fades and coloring your and desaturating your blondes. It's also a matter of how you are on a screen. And I don't mean you like you. I mean, when we look at a hair post, if you're looking through your explore page or whatever, and you see a post where it's like a guy with abs, and for whatever reason he's like shirtless doing his hair, and the whole time he's holding his like flexed brow model pose, and while he's doing his hair, he's doing these like over the top gestures and things, and like, hey guys, and like dancing almost, and kissing the camera and blowing kisses at the camera and doing these like over the top ridiculous things that you don't do in real life when you're styling your hair. That's the result of this feedback loop. Is you have to make your you are forced to make your presentation more attention grabbing than what you had seen before you made your video. So you see a video of a guy doing his hair and you're like, oh wow, that got 100,000 views. Well, I'm gonna do that with abs in my video because he didn't have abs in his video. And if I have abs and there's like clickbait of like me rubbing the pomade on my abs, then that's going to get a little bit more attention. And then the next thing that gets more attention is like, well, when I'm done doing my hair, I'm going to get in a Ferrari, and then I'm going to have the Ferrari image as the clickbait. And it's like you start adding on to what started off as, hey, this is how you style your hair, and then it's no longer reality. Then it's like this caricature, this like exaggeration, this farcical video of like what nobody actually does, but it's fun to watch. But it's totally fun to watch. It's an exaggeration of reality, but it grabs your attention. I think I've seen a lot of barbers recently doing this presentation, this over-the-top presentation that when it says content representing false realities. Have you seen this where barbers will take hair clippings, spread it along the hairline and give them the unibrow and stuff, and then for one split second there's like that clickbait image of, come on, focus. But like there's that one split second of clickbait where the guy has all this hair everywhere, and it's really just like clippings that the barber put on his face so that the before and after is that much more exaggerated. It's not real. They put fake hair around to make the before and after that much more dramatic. So this is more of that false reality we were talking about. So it's not just the Photoshop fades and the desaturated blondes. It's also these over-the-top, ridiculous, big characters. And not that it's a bad thing, but it's no longer, hey, I'm an artist, a barber in a barbershop. And so I think there's a ton of barbers and stylists who get really frustrated looking at these Instagrammers whose job is to perpetuate this feedback loop and amp it up and max it out. Because what their job is, hang on, I'm actually going to fill this in as I'm talking about it. This kind of content is what gets the big numbers. This over-the-top, ridiculous, fake content is what gets the big numbers. So I'm going to write intrigues masses. So most people, they don't know hair the way that we know hair. They don't know how to tell the difference between a really good fade and a perfect fade. But when they have this hyper realistic over the top character jumping in a Ferrari with fun music and stuff on the video, that grabs their attention. And that's what that's what social media is designed to do, is like the media aspect of it is like, hey, I'm gonna grab attention. And so this intrigues the masses. And I would say this is where a lot of advertising is bought and sold. And to be honest, whenever I see who I always believed was like a hair company for the hairstylists, if I see them advertising here, I'm over it. I'm like, cool, I'm never buying your stuff again. But that's the direction that, all these hair companies don't realize that they're hiring these social media influencers and leaving behind their initial demographic, which was the actual professionals who do the actual work. But anyways, I'll get into that. So because the masses are looking at this kind of false content and really being intrigued by it and loving it, I think this is where the marketing happens. And this is where kooks come in. So freaking all these kooks come into the hair industry or whatever art industry because of this over the top content. And I'm not saying people who do this over the top content can't do good haircuts or don't do good hair or don't do good art, because it is all based on creating some kind of art. But they could do like a pretty basic straightforward fade and then do this ridiculous skit video about it, and they're dancing behind the chair while they do it, and it's fun, and people are like, oh, that's fun, I'm gonna follow this. And so when the masses want to click on this intriguing fun little character, that's where the advertising happens, and that's where the kooks slide in with their money to you just decide like, oh well, I know a guy who has a massive following and I'm just going to pay him to advertise my product, blah blah blah. So the other thing that happens from this content that represents false realities, as far as the artist goes, is it shows, it's like when we look at something on a screen and we improve upon the art of it to create our art. This is natural. This can happen. When something unnatural is thrown in the mix, you can't improve upon what is unnatural. I need to move this thing. Right. So you cannot improve upon what is unnatural. Like, I've heard this so many times from barbers as soon as they realize that people are photoshopping fades, they go, oh my God, it makes so much sense. I've always felt insecure. Why can't my fades look like that? It's because it's not real. And so when you can't improve upon what is not natural, you get artist frustration and self-doubt. And a little scribble because I messed up. When people look at this over-the-top fun content that's ridiculous and crazy and cool, that's designed to grab attention, it's not designed to represent the reality of your art. It's designed to be better than the reality of your art. People cannot improve upon that and then create such art based on it. And it causes frustration. It causes self-doubt. And I would say, just drawing everything to the fullest extremes here, I would say eventually it leads to people giving up. And then, maybe worst case scenario, I'm going to make a little stop sign here. People will stop creating art. I could never be as good as this person who's got 1 million followers and is sponsored by all kinds of companies. And my art never could look as good as theirs. So I quit. I gave up. I think this happens. I really do. And I don't think it's the intention of somebody who is into improving the presentation of their art. I don't think that's their intention at all. It's just the nature of the beast. It's, if you want to compete, if you want your job to be intriguing the masses and selling advertising, which is, that's a job. It's a living. If you want that to be what you have to do, you have to create this over-the-top content because that's what sells. And the unfortunate side effect is it leaves our artists who want this idealized kind of like, oh, we're all just going to be nice, fun artists and have our society together and teach each other and grow together. They're all getting pissed over here. They're all getting disillusioned. And, I don't think that anybody doing any of this is aiming to mess anyone up. I don't think anybody is doing this out of, it's not like a malicious practice. It's just, I think about it like taking steroids in professional sports. It's like, well, if everyone else is taking steroids and I want a chance to compete, I better take steroids too. It's like, you kind of fall into that. I mean, I could imagine. I never played a sport in my life. Sports games. So, after thinking about this whole little chart long enough, I realized that I think these two little starred images here, or points here, I think what we have down here is when art utilizes social media to become better. So I'm going to write that here. So everything on this side of what you do with your art, this is art utilizing social media to improve and to become better. Again, this better art here being maybe the star hope the star hope, the star pupil. But I would say on the opposite side, improving your presentation and not improving your art, I would say what this is social utilizing art. And what I mean is, this is the business of media. This creating a better and better presentation. And so I would say, they have to have a subject to turn into the business of media, which is, in this case, the art of hair. And so I said this a million times, and I will say it again. If your job is to do hair, don't compare yourself to somebody whose job is social media. And as I said in this video, you can kind of do both. I would say that a lot of the superstars really do a great job at creating art, sharing it on a screen, taking inspiration, improving their art to create more art, to share it on a screen, to take inspiration, and then improve upon the presentation of their art to create more, to improve upon the art, and then create more and improve upon the presentation of the art, if that makes sense. I think about like the Scorum guys. They did a wonderful job at, like, they do phenomenal art and they represent it beautifully. Maddie Conrad, I think, is in the same boat. Robert Braid, Ryan Cullen, like, I think the superstars are like the people who are able to have a good balance of both of these. Oh, I almost forgot it. I mentioned earlier that there was a good and a bad, and I went off on the bad of feedback loop B because the reason I spent so long talking about that is I feel like, by and large, on social media, that is the biggest complaint that I hear from people, is it's not fair. The biggest desire I hear from people is that they want, I want a big following, I want to be sponsored. And then the biggest complaint that I hear is it's not fair because what they're doing is not real. And I want to do this to get this, and that's just not how it works. That's not how this business works. Anyway, so I almost forgot to mention the good aspect of feedback loop B, which is, or the potential good aspect. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, but I think this is best case scenario for, if a hairstylist gets a big, massive following, or if somebody in the business of art utilizes social media to really kill the game of social media. I think best case scenario is we get unity in the industry. If we can all come together and agree, like, oh, this organization or this person or this whatever, best case scenario, if we all agree, like, they're doing it right, I like them, and they're using it for something great, I believe it can unify the industry. I believe that the business of social media can be a great tool for the business of hair to help it come together, much in the way that hair shows have been all these years. Everybody goes to the hair show, they have that in common. And so I think the big social media accounts can be great for that unity. The other thing that I think, the other positive thing that I think comes from feedback loop B is to raise awareness outside of the industry. So I'm going to say, so this would be utilizing art and then presenting it in a way. And again, the presentation isn't necessarily just the photo or the video, but it could be the persona of the person doing the art and what they're about. And Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so I would say that one of the downsides of this side of the chart is if you only do the art and you don't do this at all, people don't want to buy it. But if you have a good balance of both, or if you're really good at this top side, you're able to reach out of the industry to raise awareness for things. Great example is the men's groomer. Jason doing his homeless haircuts, and he's like literally helping these dudes off drugs. And like, so that's freaking cool. And I think that Jason has used his presentation of what he does with hair. So he does with hair, presentates it in a way, that it raises awareness for good things, and it becomes a good aspect of this on-screen feedback loop. Because, let's be honest, like, you do homeless haircut, people want to click on it. And so a lot of people who do that are accused of like, oh, they're just doing it so people know that they're a good person. But no, like when it turns into something that's good and edifying and unifying, that is the good side of the feedback loop B. So I might sound insane to you, or I might sound like I know what I'm talking about to you, but I'll tell you, this all makes sense to me, and it makes me very happy to know when I when I don't have what this guy has, it's because I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm not willing to be a character on screen. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not willing to do it because I'm not it. So the answer to all of this, and let me segue into there, hopefully smooth, a little more smoothly than I think I'm doing it. The answer to like, okay, so now that I know what all this is, what am I supposed to aim to do? And I don't think the answer is to look at all of this and then change your course. I think the answer is to look at all this and realize what you aren't and what you are not, or what you are and what you are not, what you ain't and what you is. Um, it's the answer is do what's you. I mean, some people are really, really good at being these personalities on screen. It's just natural for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they only have to be good enough at art to create it, to pitch it in a way that they can get the big following and the sponsorships and stuff. Other people don't care about the big following and the sponsorships, and all they want to do is create the best art possible. And I don't know where I sit exactly on this. I like to think that I kind of touch on both sides of the loop here. And to be honest, like my following was growing pretty quickly on social media at the beginning because this whole thing wasn't in full force like it is now. Like the feedback is getting louder and louder and louder, and the videos are getting more and more ridiculous, and the technical skill is getting more and more ridiculously good. But at the beginning, with very little effort, I was able to kind of grow a following because I was just like kind of good at both of these aspects. I was kind of good at social media, and I was kind of good at art, and I was able to like kind of leverage the two against each other to get a little bit of a following. But then about 2 years ago, I saw a lot of people start to really grow really fast, and I didn't. And I kept doing what I'd always done, but I wasn't growing. And that's kind of what planted the seed for all of this, is I started realizing like so-and-so who had always done really good haircuts started dancing in his videos, and now suddenly he's got the big following and he's got the sponsorships. And so I started realizing all that, and that's the seed that was planted that led to all this. So this is a constantly changing and developing thing that I think about all the time. I have this like written in my phone, and whenever I have spare time or just an idea and I can't sleep at night, I just work on this. So let me know what you think about all of it. Leave it in the comments, and please, 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 if this helped you at all, tag a friend, send a friend to look at it. I want this video to go viral because I want to make a little bit of money on YouTube by doing some of this. So please, come on. Thank you.